we want to empower other women to launch their own businesses. And the recurring revenue model of subscription boxes changed the trajectory of my life and my family's life in such a positive way that I want to help other women achieve that as well.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and share about your entrepreneurial journey, and especially building your business that you recently sold in August 2022. Is that right?
That's right. Thank you so much for having me. I love to talk shop. So This is perfect.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, take us back a little bit before we get to the business and what it is and how you went about selling it and all that good stuff. Even previous to launching your prior business in 2011, just talk a bit about your career path, if you would.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, I was climbing the corporate ladder, as many of us do. And I was about 10 years into working in different roles in the music industry. So there was a lot of sponsorships and marketing. And my last job before leaving corporate America was the digital sales manager at CBS Radio. Very high stress, high pressure, like male dominated industry. And when I found out that I was pregnant, I had this mindset shift, and it no longer appealed to me to drive into the city. I was living in the Charlotte, North Carolina area at the time, and I didn't want to drive into the city. I wanted to be close to where my daughter was going to be. And so I had this mindset shift, and that's when I left corporate America. I call myself a corporate dropout. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And so it was 2011 when I had McKenna, and I just started doing some freelancing, working on the side during naps, nights, and weekends, helping small business owners. And so there was a variety of things that I was doing at the time. So that was my first business. And it was all about building websites, helping small business with their social media, copywriting, things like that. Fast forward to 2016, my family and I moved to the Asheville, North Carolina area. So we live in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Western North Carolina. And I was in this new city, is new to me. I didn't have a group of friends there yet. I didn't have a community that I felt connected to yet. And so I was getting a little bit lonely behind the screen, as many of us do, especially if you're a solopreneur. It can be really lonely. And so in 2016, to kind of fill that gap, I launched Sparkle Hustle Grow, which is a monthly subscription box for female entrepreneurs. We'll get more into the story later, but essentially I filled that gap because I was lonely behind the screen, and Happy Mail brought me joy. I subscribed to a couple different boxes like Stitch Fix and Yogi Surprise, which is for people who like to do yoga. And when I would open those boxes, I would feel joy and I would feel happiness. And I just thought to myself, I wonder if women entrepreneurs would like something like this that was filled with personal development, training, books, things like that. And that's kind of where the idea came from. It was pretty much pouring myself into a project to fill that gap of feeling loneliness and just to pour into something, try something new.
I love it. And so timely, because the whole subscription box world really was blowing up around this time. And now you help other folks who want to get into this business, which is awesome. I get this question all of the time, Julie. At Hera Hub, we get folks that come to our doorstep, so to speak, since we're a co-working space, and say, I want to start a subscription box company. What do I do? And it's so nuanced. It's so specific. And I've seen some people do it and not do it well and lose a lot of money and a lot of sleep. So it's so great that you're now helping other folks do what you did. But we'll come back to that. So I want to get into the business a bit more, and also want to talk about COVID, because I'm sure that was actually a huge opportunity for you. I know you had started the business 4 years prior to that, but how was that transition into COVID, and how did that affect your business?
There was an increased demand for things like subscription boxes because people couldn't go out, obviously, to brick and mortars. So from a consumer standpoint, they wanted this. And a lot of people were at home and maybe didn't have regular work anymore, or they found themselves with lots of time, and they were starting to look into these home-based businesses. Like, what could I do from home? So one, people were buying a lot. That was a great opportunity. Two, people were interested specifically in my subscription box because it's an entrepreneurial subscription box. It helps you in that entrepreneurial journey. And then three, the coaching side of it just blew up as well, because people, again, like you said, they don't know where to start. That's the biggest question I get too. I have this great subscription box idea and I just don't know where to start. And you can piece it all together and it's unreliable sources and you're going to waste a lot of time, kind of like I did. But now I help others not waste that time. But definitely there was an increase in demand. And during the pandemic, it was prior to all the iOS changes that impacted advertising, specifically Facebook advertising. So at the time, it almost felt like it was a spigot or a faucet where you could just turn on the ads and then, turn them down if you needed to, based off of availability and inventory. So it was a little bit the wild, wild west during that time, to be honest. There was a lot of people launching memberships and subscription boxes, but it was a lot of fun and filled with opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into building of the business and the conversation around selling the business. Mm-hmm. So first off, Julie, did you build the business thinking, I'm going to sell this someday?
I did not. And it didn't even dawn on me until a year before I sold. But let me take a step back. I don't think this conversation is being had enough in the subscription box industry. There's so many industries that it's typical to build something to sell it. And I don't feel like that conversation is very frequent in the subscription box industry. So thank you for giving the space to have that conversation. And for me, I think that I was afraid of what people would think, because I was the face of the brand. It was my baby. I had run it for 6 years and I had a lot of limiting beliefs of myself, like, oh, I don't know if I should do this because I'm going to let a lot of people down. And so I kept it very close to me that I was thinking about selling. In hindsight, everybody that I told about selling the business was so happy for me, so impressed and inspired. And so I want to encourage our listeners that if you're thinking about selling, there's nothing wrong with that. That is a very good thing to do in business. We go through different seasons of life, and what happened in last season might not work for you in the next season. And so that's kind of where it all started with me. Is I started getting that gut feeling where I didn't feel as inspired by it. And I was feeling a little bit checked out, a little bit disconnected from the brand. And so I thought, well, I wonder what it looks like to sell. So I just started doing some research and interviewing people on my own podcast, Subscription Box Basics, reaching out to other people who have sold to learn from them. And everyone was so kind and so generous with the information, even though I was keeping it very close to myself. And so when I had the conversation with my family, so my husband and my daughter, we run the business kind of together. My daughter would help out in the warehouse from time to time. My husband would do the packing and the shipping, and I would run the actual front end of the business. And so we sat down and we had this little dream life session. I had a glass of wine. McKenna had a juice box. Kenny had a beer. And we said, what would our ideal day look like? What would our ideal month or year look like? Because we homeschool, we work from home, so we have a lot of flexibility. After that conversation, it was very clear to me that my subscription box business was not going to be a legacy business that I passed down through the generations. My daughter had no interest in it. And we realized that it was okay that we had kind of grown out of this season. And fast forward to when we ultimately found our dream buyers, they were going through the same thing. It was a family that they said, we were ready for our next season. And it felt just so serendipitous. And long story short, I used a broker, a business intermediary to help me through that process because I didn't know what I didn't know, but they found that dream buyer. And when we had our first Zoom call with them, almost like an interview where I got to pitch the business, they got to pitch their vision for the business, it felt just right. It felt serendipitous. And I think that's what made the process so much more enjoyable, is because yes, it was my baby. Like, I had grown this business from scratch, but I felt so confident about who I was passing it along to.
Absolutely. It is like a child birthing a business.
It is. It is. And it's
Sure.
scary. And sometimes it's okay. We make mistakes. But again, I had too much to lose in the selling the business. And so that's why I hired on a brokerage firm to help me.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to something you said, Julie, because I think it's so important. I just want to underline this. So many small business owners don't think about this whole process, and to your point, get really personally tied to the business and the connections they have with their customers, and feel like, as you said, they are going to betray their customers by selling the business, that there won't be that connection there. And women, especially, I mean, that's why I started this series, because we hear all the time about men who have, bought and sold multiple businesses, and this is just a thing, but we don't hear these stories of women very often. And so I appreciate you taking the time to share your experience with it, because I think it can really encourage others to do the same.
Thank you. Yeah. And there was some emotional detachment. It's almost like therapy that I had to go through to make sure I was ready. And it's funny because when I had the first call with my broker, one of the first questions she said, "Are you emotionally ready to sell your business?" And I was so blown away that she asked that, and so appreciative, because at the moment, I could say, yes, I had done the work to emotionally prepare myself. I had started to pull back my image as the face of the brand. And I think what's really important too is when we handed off the business, the first couple of weeks, we kept it under the radar. And so that the new business owners could learn the back end. And it was like drinking water from a fire hose, learning the operations. And then we strategically announced it with a video of the two of us sitting side by side, me telling the story of why I was selling, her telling me, introducing her, and her telling her story. And I think almost like this endorsement, like, I know you, when I'm talking to my customers, I'm saying, I know you guys are in good hands. You're going to love her. She has great visions for this company. Stick around. You don't want to leave right now. And I think that handoff that was so intentional really helped with maintaining our customers, because with a subscription box, those customers, it's recurring revenue. So they pay every single month to get the new box. We didn't want them to drop off just because there was a new owner. We wanted them to stick around to see what was in store. So we were very, very intentional, did some social media together, did a video together, and they actually flew to our house. They're from Seattle and we live in North Carolina. They flew here and did some on the ground, training with us on our last shipping day. So it was really, really great to get to know them and feel confident.
Absolutely. And how did it go? How did that transition go? Did the client stick around?
Yeah, it was great. Like I said, I think we mitigated the drop off, or what we call in the subscription box industry, churn. Churn is the percentage of people who drop off month to month, and it's normal to have churn. And so it was a very smooth transaction. I worked with the new owners for the first 30 days very, very closely. And then the next 60, 90 days, I was there for support, but they started running with it very quickly. And people were very happy with it, very responsive. They welcomed her. And it was a family that bought it, but the woman was pretty much going to be the face of the brand. And like, we called ourselves Chief Sparklers. So she was the new Chief Sparkler, and she was very well received, and she's killing it. Like, I'm just so proud of her. I still follow the business, and I love the touches that she's put on it, her personal touch. And it's fun to see it thriving still.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's get into some advice, lessons learned going through this process. First, Julie, I'll ask, what were some of the things that transpired where you look back and say, I wish I would have done that differently, or I wish somebody would have told me?
Some of the things I've learned were, and I'll explain in a minute, but keep it simple and tidy up those books, make yourself as profitable as possible. So with keeping it simple, I feel like my personality is the type where I like simple, but I also like new projects. So when I get bored, I'll just continue to add new projects because it's exciting and it's fun to create. I could have been running this on such a leaner frame, on such a leaner tech stack, and been much more profitable years ago if I just kept it much more simple. So I would say, look at your tech stack. Are there any softwares that are unnecessary? If so, drop them. Not only does it simplify things, but that's less expenses. I would say, keep your books tidy. That was one thing that we had to really clean up because I was running two businesses at the same time. And I made the mistake of having them both going into the same QuickBooks account. And so that was a bit of a challenge when it came time for due diligence. And so if you are thinking about selling at some point and you have multiple businesses going into the same QuickBooks or the same accounts, split those in advance and keep them separated so that it's easier to see the true P&L, the true expenses. And I think that was something that I learned the hard way. That was a lot of work to recategorize things so we could say, this is for this business and this is for this business. So, but one of the things that I learned too is it's not necessarily in the subscription box world that you have to hit this certain subscriber number. There's no magic number of, when you hit 1,000 subscribers, then you could sell. It's all about, is this business profitable right now? And what are the opportunities that the new owner could pursue as additional revenue or streams of revenue? And so if you're listening to this, that's the one thing you need to look at is my business profitable? And if so, great. How can I make it more profitable? But if it's not, then think hard about what big changes can I make to shift this into the green.
Talk about, Julie, the decision in hiring a broker, and what that process was like. And then how long did this all take?
I'll start there. It was a very, very short, but not frantic, that's not the right word, very fast sprint, 91 days. From the moment we listed the business to the day that we closed on it was 91 days, which is wild to me.
Wow.
Think about, if you're listening and you think about like 90 days from now, what can you imagine the difference in your life? So I decided to hire a broker because I had an idea of what my business was worth, but I wasn't 100% certain. It was just from doing my own research. So I had asked a friend of mine who had recently sold her business for a recommendation, and she recommended Christine from the Magnolia firm. And I reached out to Christine and we had a kind of a consult about, okay, Christine's trying to get to know me. I'm trying to explain why I want to sell my business and a little bit about it, like what it's worth. And so I first hired her to do a broker opinion of value because I wanted to validate, like, what is my business really worth?
Yeah.
And so when she validated that, the numbers were pretty much what I had in my head without me telling her. She gave me back some of the same information that I was hoping to hear. So that made me feel good. And there was just so much I didn't know about that part of business, about what contracts needed to look like, what due diligence, do I need to hire a lawyer? What do I need? It wasn't something that I wanted to figure out on my own. I can get scrappy. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I can get scrappy sometimes, but this was not the time and the place for me to get scrappy. I knew it. And so I, again, hired her first to give me the broker opinion of value. Once that was in my hands, I was like, let's do this. I'm ready. I'm emotionally ready. You'll walk through the due diligence with me because I've done due diligence on purchasing a home before. So I kind of had an idea, but it's different because, you have to put together a playbook, which is your standard operating procedures, all the logins for everything, so many different things. And so Christine and her team held my hand through that process. And I did a lot of the work, but they were my North Star during the whole thing. What I loved the most was that she had the hard conversations with people before she even brought them to me. So I didn't have to waste time on calls with tire kickers or people who didn't actually have the funding. They were just being nosy or curious about this business. And so she would have those conversations about Do you have the finances ready to move forward with something like this? Why do you want to buy a business? What's your background in business? And she would only bring me qualified candidates, which saved me so much time and stress. And I was able to show up to these, we call them pitch calls, where I would pitch the business and then they would pitch themselves to me, because it had to be a mutual fit. You can say no to someone that wants to buy your business. And that was a good feeling, to be able to have that control. And so she would set up these pitch calls, and I was actually able to show up and have fun with them instead of being nervous about having awkward financial conversations or not knowing what was next. And so that was actually really fun. That was part of the sprint that happened very fast, but I felt like I was in good hands. And again, I didn't want to try to piece this part of my life and my business together. So that's why I hired them.
What did it look like as far as the deal? Did you do any carrybacks? Was it all cash? I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who get, kind of tied into the business for even 2-3 years. And It doesn't sound like you did that.
No, we did a cash deal, and I had a kind of like a bank of hours that I committed to them for training hours. Again, they came to our house, did some training here, and then I created lots of videos and SOPs that I put together this playbook for them. And then I would meet with them on Zoom to talk over things, or we used an app called Voxer, which is like a walkie-talkie style app. So they could shoot over questions anytime and I would answer. And again, they really didn't need me much after that 30-day mark, other than just, checking in with some answer or some questions. Hey, what do you think about this? And so I wasn't tied into it, but I did have that bank of hours. And what else? With the subscription box world, keep in mind that we're pre-selling boxes. So say you buy a box today online, you're actually buying the next month's box when it came to my shipping cadence. And so we did have some multi-month subscriptions that were prepaid. And so, for example, maybe someone bought a year's worth and they paid up front, but I've only fulfilled 3 months so far. So we did have to give credit for all of those, because I wouldn't be fulfilling those, the new owners would. And then in the deal as well, it was the deal was actually for the business. It was a multi-6-figure sale. But then on top of that, they bought inventory, because we held inventory, and that was kind of a separate section of the contract. So I learned all of it as I went, and with the guidance of the Magnolia firm. But it was crazy that the inventory that they purchased was almost to the dollar of what the credit they were getting in prepaid subscriptions. So those almost canceled each other out. So it worked in both parties' favor. It's not like I had this magic wand to make this happen. It's just I was resourceful. And I now know that this could happen in the future. So every future business that I set up, because I like to dabble in different businesses, will definitely have its own 2 feet in case that in the future I might be able to sell it. So that's one of the big lessons that I learned through my experience.
And Julie, I see lots of items behind you. Are these some of the boxes, some of the clients you've worked with?
Yes. So I now coach new and aspiring subscription box entrepreneurs. They come to me at that same stage where what you were saying is, I have an idea, I just don't know where to start. And so I have a podcast with a co-host called Subscription Box Basics, and it's just what it sounds like. We're talking about the very basics of the subscription box industry and what it's like to be a box owner. And then we have a signature course called Subscription Box Boot Camp, which will help you go from idea to reality and get that box idea off the ground. And I've been coaching through that boot camp since 2018. So I feel like I've seen a little bit of everything, and we've helped over 500 boxes launch. And it's mostly women who work with us. That's just what our brand attracts, because, we have a lot of pink and turquoise. And so, but that's all. Yes, a lot of sparkle. That's all intentional, because we want to empower other women to launch their own businesses. And the recurring revenue model of subscription boxes changed the trajectory of my life and my family's life in such a positive way that I want to help other women achieve that as well. And it's so different than just a typical product-based business. There's just more moving parts, because you're consistently curating new boxes. And so, yeah, you can be stuck with a bunch of products in your garage or in your kitchen or living room or wherever if you don't set that foundation and create your systems for success. And I'm sure you've heard this a million times with any business. It's a lot of it is based off of your marketing and growing that email list, so you actually have someone to launch to and to sell to. So that's one of the things that we talk with our students a lot, is teaching them ways to grow their email list.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for sharing your story. I appreciate your time. It's been really insightful.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I really appreciate you.